He said the loser gets punished, then asked if I was scared. I think the moment I realized that night wasn't just another stupid game between us was when he looked me dead in the eyes and asked, in that low voice of his, "Are you scared?" It wasn't the kind of question you ask during some harmless round of cards or dice or even those idiotic bets we'd made countless times before. No, this one hit me different, because he wasn't smiling. He wasn't teasing. He was studying me, as if my answer would change everything between us. And maybe it did. But I should start earlier, before that moment. We'd been best friends since high school, or at least that's what we called it. Back then, he was the one everyone noticed. Tall, athletic, the kind of guy who made people turn their heads without even trying. And me? I was the shadow next to him. The quieter one. The one who laughed too hard at his jokes, who always let him win in dumb competitions, who secretly ached every time his arm slung around my shoulders in that effortless way, as if I was nothing more than his buddy. But I didn't mind being in his orbit, because at least that meant I was close. Close enough to hear his late-night thoughts, close enough to catch the tiny cracks in his confident facade, close enough to imagine, sometimes, that maybe he needed me too. After graduation, life didn't scatter us the way it does with most friends. We ended up at the same college, even chose to room together. That's when the games started. Not just video games or poker nights, but little competitions we made up to keep ourselves entertained. Who could run faster to the cafeteria in the rain? Who could hold their breath longer underwater at the pool? Who could go the longest without checking their phone? Always stupid. Always ending with one of us declaring victory and the other mock complaining about being the loser. But the thing was, the loser always had to face a punishment. It started out innocent enough. Loser does the winner's laundry, loser buys late-night pizza, loser cleans the bathroom. And then, slowly, the punishments got riskier, more daring. Loser has to go ask out a random stranger for their number. Loser has to jump into the freezing lake in October. Loser has to run down the hall naked for 3 seconds. He always pushed for the more outrageous dares. I always agreed because deep down I couldn't say no to him. That night was no different, or at least I thought it wasn't. We were playing cards in our dorm room, sprawled across the floor, the desk lamp casting shadows against the walls. A couple of our friends had been there earlier, but they'd left when it got late, leaving just the two of us. A half-empty bag of chips, and that unspoken tension that seemed to hang heavier the older we got. I don't even remember what game we were playing. All I remember is that I lost. And when I groaned, already bracing myself for whatever punishment he'd throw at me this time, he leaned in close, resting his elbow on his knee, and said with that crooked grin, "The loser gets punished." I laughed because that was our script. But then he tilted his head, eyes dark and unreadable, and asked, "Are you scared?" And just like that, the air shifted. I should have been scared. Scared of what he might dare me to do. Scared of what I might agree to. But if I'm being honest, the fear wasn't about embarrassment or humiliation. It was about how close he was, how the warmth of his breath hit my cheek, how the possibility of something more than friendship was suddenly hanging right there between us. What kind of punishment are we talking about? I tried to keep my voice steady. He just smirked. That depends on how brave you're feeling. The truth? I wasn't brave at all. I'd spent years hiding what I felt for him, terrified that if he ever caught even a glimpse of it, I'd lose him forever. But in that moment, staring into his eyes, I realized the real punishment would be pretending any longer that I didn't want him. Still, I played it safe. I shrugged, forced a grin, and said, "Hit me with your worst." He leaned back, thoughtful, as if deciding what line to cross. And then he said it, "You have to do whatever I tell you, no backing out. Deal?" My heart slammed in my chest. That wasn't how we usually played. There was always a limit, a boundary. But not this time. "Deal," I said, even though my throat was dry, even though every nerve in my body screamed that I had no idea what I was agreeing to. Looking back, I wonder if he already knew. If all those punishments before, the dares, the risks, the times he'd pushed me just a little further than comfort, were his way of testing the waters, of seeing how far I'd go for him. Maybe this was just another test. Or maybe it was the moment he finally stopped pretending too. Because the first thing he told me to do wasn't funny. It wasn't humiliating. It wasn't even a dare in the usual sense. He looked me straight in the eye and said softly, "Tell me the truth. Do I scare you?" And I froze. Not because of the question itself, but because of the way he asked it. Like he wasn't talking about punishments anymore. Like he wasn't talking about games. He was asking if the idea of us, terrified me. Did it? God, yes. But not in the way he thought. I laughed, because laughter was safer than silence. "You? Scare me? Come on, man." But he didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just watched me, waiting. And for the first time, I couldn't hide behind the game. So I told him the truth, or at least part of it.
No.
"You don't scare me." His expression softened, almost like he was relieved. Then he leaned a little closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Good. Because the punishment isn't over yet." My heart thudded so hard I thought he'd hear it. And maybe he did, because that smirk returned, only this time it wasn't playful. It was daring. "Next," he said, "you have to let me ask you something. And you have to answer honestly." I swallowed. "Okay." He leaned in until his face was inches from mine. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if we crossed that line?" The room spun. The world tilted. And suddenly, all the nights of laughter, all the years of being his best friend, all the times I'd bitten my tongue instead of telling him how badly I wanted him, they all collided into that single, fragile moment. And I realized the real game had only just begun. For a heartbeat, I couldn't even breathe. His words just sat there between us, hanging heavy and impossible. Cross the line. It was everything I'd imagined, everything I'd wanted but never dared to admit out loud. And now he was asking me if I'd thought about it, asking as if he didn't already know the answer written all over my face. I wanted to look away, to laugh it off, to defuse the tension with some joke the way we always did. But I couldn't. His eyes were locked on mine, unwavering, like he was holding me there on purpose. Finally, I managed to croak out, "What line?" He tilted his head, almost smiling, but his voice was serious. "You know what I mean." And I did. God, I did. I thought about all the years I'd spent with him. The sleepovers in high school where we'd shared a bed because neither of us wanted to sleep on the floor. The times I'd caught myself staring too long at the curve of his jaw, the way his shirt clung to his chest. The moments when our knees brushed under the table, when his hand lingered on my shoulder longer than it needed to. Every single memory felt like proof that I had always been on the edge of something dangerous, something I could never have. And now he was daring me to admit it. "You want an honest answer?" I asked quietly. He nodded. So I gave it to him, my voice trembling. "Yeah, I wonder all the time." For a second, he didn't react. He just stared at me, expression unreadable. And then, slowly, he smiled. Not his usual cocky grin, but something softer, something that made my chest ache. "I knew it," he whispered. "That should have been the moment everything changed. Maybe in some stories it would have led to a kiss right then, the kind you see in movies, where years of tension finally explode into something undeniable. But that's not what happened. Instead, he leaned back, his smirk returning. But this time there was something else beneath it. A challenge. "Then your punishment," he said, "is to show me." My stomach dropped. "Show you?" "Yeah." He shrugged like it was nothing, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "If you've wondered so much, then stop wondering." I swear my pulse was loud enough to drown out the silence of the room. He was daring me, pushing me, and I didn't know if it was a trap, if this was just another one of his games taken too far, or if he really wanted it. But I couldn't walk away, not after he'd opened that door. So I moved closer, just a little at first, testing the waters. His smirk faded, replaced with something else, something nervous, maybe, and that gave me courage. "You sure about this?" I whispered. His voice was low, almost unsteady. "Are you?" I don't know who leaned in first. Maybe it was both of us. But suddenly his lips were on mine. It wasn't fireworks or explosions. It was hesitant, shaky, The kind of kiss you give when you're terrified of what it means but desperate not to pull away. His mouth was warm, his breath unsteady, and when I realized he wasn't stopping, that he was kissing me back just as much as I was kissing him, my whole body lit up. I dreamed of it 1,000 times, but nothing compared to the reality. The way his hand brushed against my jaw. The way he sighed softly against my lips, like it was a relief. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathless, he let out a shaky laugh. Well, guess we crossed it. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My chest was so full it hurt. So, now what? He leaned his forehead against mine, still catching his breath. Now, we see if we can handle the punishment. It should have been perfect. It should have been the beginning of everything I'd ever wanted. But the thing about lines is, once you cross them, you can't go back. And I think both of us knew that, even in the haze of that first kiss. The next morning was awkward. We didn't talk about it. We woke up late, stumbled into the kitchen, made coffee like nothing had happened. But every time our eyes met, I felt it. The memory of his lips on mine, the unspoken truth buzzing between us. And then, slowly, things started to shift. He touched me more often, casually at first. A hand on my back when we passed in the hall. A nudge of his knee against mine when we sat on the couch. He called me loser with a grin, like it was our secret. But there were moments when I caught him looking at me, really looking, and my heart would stutter. I thought maybe, just maybe, we were figuring it out. But then came the night that broke me. We were at a party, packed into a too-small apartment with music thumping and people everywhere. He was in his element, laughing, drinking, surrounded by friends. And me? I stayed close, trying not to lose him in the crowd. At some point, I looked over and saw him flirting with a girl. His arm draped around her shoulders, his smile easy and charming. And she leaned into him, giggling, touching his chest like she belonged there. It was stupid. We'd never put a name to what happened between us. We weren't together. But watching him with her felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped something vital out. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. And then, as if sensing me, he glanced across the room. Our eyes met, and in that split second, I swear I saw guilt flash across his face. But he didn't move. He didn't push her away. He didn't come over. He just kept smiling, kept pretending. And I realized maybe I'd been pretending too. Pretending that one kiss, one punishment, meant something more to him. That night, when we finally stumbled back to our room, I didn't know what to say. He flopped onto his bed, laughing about how wild the party had been, like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't just shattered me without even realizing it. I wanted to scream, to ask him what we were, to demand an answer, but instead, I crawled into my bed, turned off the light, and whispered into the dark, "Yeah, I'm scared," because I was not of the punishment, not of him. I was scared of losing him, and I didn't know if I already had. The days after that party felt like a blur. On the surface, nothing had changed. We still hung out, still cracked jokes, still made stupid bets about who could finish their assignments first or who could chug a soda faster. To anyone else, we looked exactly the same as we always had. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time he brushed past me in the hall, every time his arm slung around my shoulder like old times, every time he grinned at me with that same crooked smile, I couldn't tell if he was just being my best friend or if he was silently asking me to remember that night, that kiss, that line we'd crossed. And I couldn't ask, because if I did, I was terrified of what the answer might be. I kept telling myself I should be grateful. At least I still had him. At least he hadn't pulled away completely after the kiss. At least we were still us. But then I'd remember the girl at the party, how easily he'd slipped into that role, how natural it had looked, and I'd feel like a fool. Because the truth was, for him, maybe it had been a game. Another punishment. Another dare. Something to test me, to see how far I'd go. For me, it had been everything. One night, a week after the party, I found myself lying awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling while his steady breathing filled the silence from the other bed. I wanted so badly to climb into his bed the way we used to pretend I was just cold or restless, to let myself be close to him again. But I didn't, because I didn't trust myself not to want more, not to beg him to kiss me again, not to shatter what little we still had. Instead, I whispered into the darkness, words he'd never hear. You scare me, not because of what you might do, but because of what I feel when you do it. The next day, everything came to a head. It was a Saturday, the kind of lazy afternoon where the world felt heavy and slow. He was sprawled on the couch with a bag of chips, flipping through channels, while I sat at my desk pretending to study but really just staring at the same page for 20 minutes. Then he said it. So, are we ever going to talk about it? I froze. My pen hovered uselessly above the paper. Talk about what? He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the TV, like he wasn't really invested in my answer. But I knew better. You know what? My chest tightened. If you're talking about the game, I'm talking about the kiss. The words hit me like a punch. I set my pen down, hands trembling. What about it? Finally, he turned, his eyes locking on mine. Was it just a punishment to you? The question shattered me, because it meant he was wondering the same thing I was. It meant he didn't know either. And suddenly, all the fear I'd been swallowing for weeks bubbled up. I stood, pacing the room because I couldn't sit still under the weight of it. Do you really want the truth? Yes, he said without hesitation. I laughed bitterly. The truth is, it wasn't a punishment for me. It was... My voice cracked. It was everything I'd wanted for years. Silence filled the room. My heart pounded in my ears. Then softly he said, I thought so. I spun around. What's that supposed to mean? He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly uncertain, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen him before. It means, I've been thinking about it too. A lot. And I don't know what to do with that. I stared at him, my whole world tilting. So you liked it? His eyes flickered away. Yeah, too much. For a moment, the air between us was electric. I wanted to close the distance, to grab him, to kiss him again until neither of us could doubt what it meant. But then his voice dropped, quiet and almost broken. But it scares me. Those words cut deeper than I expected. Why? Because, he exhaled, shaking his head, because if we go down that road, there's no turning back. And if it goes wrong, I lose you. I can't lose you. My chest ached. You think I don't feel the same? You think I'm not terrified every second of losing you? He looked at me then, eyes shining with something raw and unguarded. So what do we do? I didn't have an answer. Part of me wanted to be reckless, to say screw it, let's just risk everything, let's see where this goes. But another part of me, the part that remembered the girl at the party, the part that knew how easy it would be for him to move on if this got too real, held me back. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I made it a joke. We flip a coin. He blinked. What? If it's heads, we pretend it never happened. If it's tails? I swallowed hard. We don't pretend anymore. He laughed, shaking his head. You're insane. But then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a coin, and held it up between us. You call it. My heart raced as he flipped it, the coin spinning in the air, catching the light before landing in his palm. He slapped it onto the back of his other hand, eyes flicking up to mine. Tails? I whispered, barely able to breathe. Slowly, he lifted his hand. It was tails. For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. And then, almost in slow motion, he leaned forward, closing the distance between us. His lips met mine again, firmer this time, less hesitant, as if the coin had given him permission to stop holding back. I kissed him back with everything I had, pouring years of longing, of fear, of hope into it. And when we finally broke apart, both gasping for air, he smiled, really smiled. Well, he said softly, I guess that settles it. But deep down, I knew it didn't settle anything at all. Because love, real love, isn't decided by a coin toss. And the real punishment was only just beginning. At first, it felt like we'd made the right choice. After that coin toss, after that kiss, the world seemed brighter. We started acting different. Not in big ways, but in the little things that only we would notice. His hand lingered on my arm when he passed me something. I caught him staring at me when he thought I wasn't looking. When we laughed together, it felt deeper, like we were both aware of the new current running underneath everything. For a while, it was enough. We didn't call it anything. We didn't label it. We didn't even talk about what it meant. We just let it happen. The late-night whispers. The stolen kisses when the door was closed. The way his body found mine on the couch when we watched movies, like gravity had made its choice for us. And I thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is the beginning of something real. But the problem with crossing lines is that you start wondering where the next one is. One night, weeks later, we were lying on his bed, both of us half asleep, my head on his shoulder. He was tracing lazy patterns on my arm, and for once, I felt like everything was simple. Then he said it. "We should keep this a secret." I froze. A secret? Yeah, at least for now. People wouldn't get it. And I don't want things to get complicated. Complicated. The word felt like a punch to the chest. Because to me, things already were complicated. Every second I spent with him, I was falling deeper. Every time he touched me, I wanted more. But I swallowed it down. Yeah, okay. A secret. He kissed my forehead. Like that was the end of it. But lying there in the dark, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just scared of losing him anymore. I was scared of losing myself in him. The secret stretched between us, invisible but heavy. Around our friends, we acted normal. The same jokes, the same banter, the same casual closeness. No one suspected a thing. And sometimes that made it thrilling. Like we had this whole world tucked away just for us. But other times, it felt like I was suffocating. Like I was living half a life, one where I was just his friend in public, and one where I was more in private. And I didn't know how long I could keep that split from tearing me apart. The breaking point came one night when we went out with a group to another party. I told myself I could handle it, that I could watch him laugh and joke and be the center of attention without feeling that sharp sting in my chest. That I could pretend he wasn't mine, even though in the quiet hours he was. But then it happened again. Another girl. She leaned into him, her smile bright, her hand brushing his arm, and he let it happen. He laughed with her, let her touch linger, didn't move away. And suddenly, I was back in that same hell as before, watching him slip into a role that didn't include me. Except this time it was worse, because now I wasn't just his best friend. I was his secret, and secrets don't get a say. I left the party early, told him I wasn't feeling well. He didn't follow me. He didn't even text. When he finally stumbled back to our dorm hours later, I was still awake, lying in bed with my back to the door. He smelled like smoke and alcohol, his footsteps unsteady. "You awake?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. He sighed, collapsing onto his bed. Minutes passed in silence. Then, in the dark, I heard him whisper, "Don't be scared. I've got you." And I broke. Because the truth was, he didn't. Not in the way I needed. Not in the way I'd been giving myself to him piece by fragile piece. The next morning, I couldn't keep it in anymore. We sat across from each other at breakfast, the cafeteria buzzing with noise, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. "I can't do this," I blurted out. He looked up, frowning. "Do what?" "This." I gestured vaguely between us, my hands shaking. "The secret, the pretending, watching you with other people like it doesn't tear me apart." His jaw tightened. "You said you were okay with it." "I said that because I didn't want to lose you," I snapped, louder than I meant to. A few heads turned, but I didn't care. "But I can't keep being your secret, man. I can't." For a moment, he just stared at me, eyes dark and stormy. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Do you have any idea how hard this is for me? I'm trying to figure this out. I don't even know what this makes me. Okay?" My throat tightened. "It makes you someone I love. And it makes me someone who's tired of being scared." Silence. I don't know what I expected. Maybe for him to get angry. Maybe for him to confess something big and raw. But instead, he just sat back, running a hand over his face. "Maybe we need space." The words hit harder than any punishment ever could. Space. I repeated, my voice breaking. Yeah, just time to think. To breathe. I nodded, because what else could I do? But inside, I was crumbling. Because space sounded a lot like goodbye. That night, lying alone in our room, I thought about every moment we'd shared. The games, the laughter, the punishments, the kiss, the coin toss, the secret. And I realized something. The real punishment wasn't losing a game. It wasn't the dares or the challenges. The real punishment was falling in love with someone who wasn't ready to love me back. The space he asked for didn't come as one clean break. Came in pieces. First, it was little things. He stopped sitting next to me in lectures, choosing a spot across the aisle instead. He stopped waiting for me after class, stopped swinging by my desk to ask if I wanted to grab food. Then, slowly, the bigger things followed. The late-night games ended. The lazy afternoons sprawled on the couch disappeared. The silence between us grew, until it wasn't silence at all but a wall I couldn't climb. And all the while, I told myself this was just temporary. That space meant time, and time meant maybe he'd come back. But deep down, I think I knew better. The hardest part wasn't losing the secret kisses or the hidden touches. It was losing the friend I'd built my whole world around. I kept replaying our history in my head. Every laugh, every look, every dare. Wondering if I'd imagined it all. Wondering if maybe, to him, it had never been what it was to me. And the cruelest thought of all, maybe the punishment had been mine alone. Weeks passed. We still lived in the same room, but it felt like two strangers occupying parallel universes. He'd come in late, collapse on his bed, and pretend I was asleep. I'd leave early, clutching my books like armor, pretending not to notice the way he avoided my eyes. I thought about confronting him, about demanding answers. But every time I pictured it, I froze. Because what if the answer was exactly what I feared? That it had meant nothing. That I was just a game he'd grown tired of playing. Then, one night, something happened that shattered what little denial I had left. I came back from the library late, my arms full of books, and opened the door to our room. He was there, sitting on his bed, head in his hands. For a moment, I thought he was asleep. Then I heard it. A soft, broken sound. He was crying. I froze in the doorway, my heart lurching. I'd seen him angry, cocky, drunk, even vulnerable. But never this. Never undone. "Hey!" I said softly, setting my books down. "What's wrong?" He looked up, eyes red, face blotchy in a way that didn't suit the boy who was always so sure of himself. "I don't know what I'm doing," he whispered. I crossed the room slowly, careful not to scare him away. "What do you mean?" He shook his head, scrubbing at his eyes with the heel of his hand. "Us, me, this whole thing. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't even know how to be what I need." My chest ached. "You don't have to have all the answers." "Yes, I do," he snapped, his voice cracking. "Because I can see it in your face. Every time you look at me, you're waiting. You're waiting for me to choose. And His voice dropped, raw and broken. "I don't know if I can." I swallowed hard, tears burning my own eyes. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe the real punishment isn't you being scared. Maybe it's me being too much of a coward." The room spun. For months, I'd been carrying the weight of fear of losing him, fear of never being enough, fear of being just a secret. And now, hearing him admit his own fear, I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. "Do you love me?" I whispered. The question hung heavy, trembling in the air. He opened his mouth, closed it again, ran a hand through his hair like the answer was clawing at him but wouldn't come out. Finally, he said, "I don't know." And that was it. The knife twisting, the game ending. Because "I don't know" was worse than no. I stood, my body shaking, every piece of me threatening to shatter. Then maybe space isn't enough. He looked up, panicked. "Wait, don't." But I was already moving toward the door, my voice breaking as I said, "The punishment's over. You win." And then I left. The days that followed felt like moving through molasses. I transferred into another dorm, citing schedule conflicts. I stopped going to the places we used to haunt together. I cut out the pieces of my life that reminded me of him, even though that meant carving away most of myself. It hurt like hell. But sometimes, surviving means letting the wound bleed until it scabs over. Months passed. Seasons changed. And slowly I learned how to breathe again. I learned how to laugh without hearing his echo. I learned how to walk into a room without scanning for him first. But the truth? I never stopped loving him. Love like that doesn't just evaporate. It lingers, haunting the corners of your memory, reminding you of what almost was. And yet, buried beneath all the heartbreak, there was something else too. Hope. Because even though I'd lost him, even though the punishment had left scars, I realized something important. I hadn't been scared because of him. I'd been scared because of me. Because I'd been afraid to love out loud, to claim what I wanted, to risk being hurt. And now, even with the hurt, I knew I'd survived. And maybe, just maybe, that meant next time I wouldn't be so scared. Because love isn't a game. It's not about punishments or dares or who wins and who loses. It's about showing up, choosing, risking. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. The real punishment isn't losing the game. It's never playing at all. Life has a strange way of moving forward even when you don't feel ready for it. After I moved out of our dorm, my world shrank into routines. I threw myself into classes, into work, into anything that could fill the silence. I learned how to study late into the night without listening for his voice. I learned how to walk across campus without scanning crowds for him. But every once in a while, I'd catch a glimpse of him anyway. Sometimes it was across the quad, his laugh carrying in the wind like a knife straight to my chest. Sometimes it was in the dining hall, sitting with a group of friends, his head thrown back in that easy way that had always drawn people in. And sometimes it was in the quiet, when I closed my eyes at night and still felt the ghost of his lips on mine. No matter how far I tried to run, pieces of him stayed with me. Months blurred together. I told myself I was healing, and in some ways I was. The rawness dulled into something less sharp, more bearable. I learned how to smile again. I even started saying yes when other people asked me out. Small, tentative dates that never went much further than coffee or a movie. But deep down, none of them measured up. None of them felt like him. And I hated myself for it. Because how could I compare people who were trying, really trying, to someone who had left me behind? But the heart doesn't follow logic. It clings to what it wants, even when it knows better. It wasn't until the spring semester that everything came crashing back. I was walking back from class, earbuds in, when I heard someone calling my name. I turned, and there he was, standing under the cherry blossoms in full bloom, hands shoved into his pockets, looking at me like no time had passed at all. For a moment, I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the ground, my chest tight. I wanted to run, to vanish, to protect the fragile peace I'd built. But I didn't. I just stood there as he walked toward me, every step pulling the past back to life. "Hey," he said softly, almost like a question. "Hey." My voice cracked. He shifted, clearly nervous, a sight I'd rarely seen on him before. "Can we talk?" I should have said no. I should have protected myself. But I nodded anyway, because no matter how much time had passed, part of me still belonged to him. We sat on a bench under the blossoms, petals drifting down like snow. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he broke the silence. "I'm sorry." 2 words, and suddenly my heart was in my throat. He went on, his voice unsteady. "I was a coward. I didn't know what I wanted, and instead of figuring it out, I let you carry all of it. I hurt you, worse than I ever meant to, and I've hated myself for it ever since." I swallowed hard, my hands gripping the bench. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted. "Because no matter what I do, no matter who I'm with, it's you. It's always been you." My chest burned, torn between anger and longing. "You don't get to say that after everything." "I know," he whispered. "I don't deserve another chance. But if there's even a piece of you that still feels the way I do, I had to try." Silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of petals hitting the ground. And in that silence, I felt everything at once. The love I still carried for him, fierce and stubborn. The hurt he'd left behind, raw and unhealed. The years of friendship that had built us. The kiss that had broken us. The space that had nearly destroyed me. I realized in that moment that he had been right about one thing. Love is terrifying. It's risking everything with no guarantees. It's handing someone your heart and hoping they don't drop it. But it's also the only thing that had ever made me feel truly alive. I turned to him, my voice trembling. Do you even understand what you're asking? You're asking me to trust you with the same heart you broke. His eyes shone, wet with unshed tears. I know, and I can't promise I won't screw up. But I swear this time I won't run. Not from you. Not from us. My throat tightened. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him more than anything. But I'd learned the hard way that wanting isn't the same as trusting. So I said the only thing I could. Then prove it. He blinked. How? Show me. I whispered. Show me you're not scared anymore. Show me this isn't just another game, another punishment. Show me you're choosing me, not because you lost a dare, not because of a coin toss, not because it's easy, but because it's what you want. For a moment, he just stared at me, his chest rising and falling like he was holding back a storm. And then, slowly, he reached for my hand. His fingers trembled, but they laced through mine with a certainty I hadn't felt before. I want you, he said, his voice steady. Not as a secret, not as a punishment, as mine. And for the first time, I believed him. We sat there under the blossoms, hand in hand, the weight of the past still between us but no longer unbearable. It wouldn't be easy. I knew that. He knew that. Love never is. But as I leaned against him, feeling his warmth, hearing his steady heartbeat, I realized something. Maybe the punishment had never been losing the game. Maybe it had been waiting this long to finally start playing for real. The weeks after that day under the cherry blossoms felt unreal. Like I was living in a dream I had no right to be in. He and I started talking again, slowly, carefully, as if we were both afraid the wrong word might send us spiraling back into silence. But this time it wasn't built on games or dares or unspoken tension. It was built on something rawer, an honesty we'd both avoided for too long. He told me about his fear, about how he'd grown up in a house where the word gay was spat like a curse, about how much of his life had been a performance, chasing expectations, chasing approval that never came. And I told him about the nights I cried after he walked away, about how I thought I'd never be enough for anyone because if he, who had once known me better than anyone, couldn't stay, then who would? It wasn't easy to hear each other's truths, but it was real. And for the first time, it felt like we weren't hiding. One night, after hours of talking in his car, he reached across the console and touched my hand. It was tentative, almost shy, but there was no dare hanging between us, no punishment, no reason other than want. I looked at him, and he looked back, and in that silence, something shifted. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It wasn't about fear. It was about choosing. So when he leaned across the seat and kissed me, it wasn't hesitant like the first time. It wasn't desperate like the last. It was steady, sure. Promise sealed with lips. And this time, I kissed him back without hesitation. We didn't become perfect overnight. There were fights. Small ones about time and jealousy and insecurities that still lingered like ghosts. There were nights when he'd pull away, not because he didn't want me, but because old fears whispered too loud in his ear. There were mornings when I woke up wondering if I'd made a mistake, if I'd set myself up to be broken again. But there were also mornings when I woke up to his arm draped around me, his breath soft against my neck, and I realized I'd never felt safer. There were afternoons when he'd lace his fingers through mine in public, not caring who saw, and I'd feel years of shame and fear begin to loosen their grip. There were nights when he'd look at me like I was the only thing in the world that made sense, and I knew, without a doubt, that whatever had broken between us had been worth piecing back together. One evening, as we sat on the dorm rooftop, the city lights flickering around us, he said something I'll never forget. You know, he murmured, I used to think losing was the worst thing that could happen, That if I ever lost, I'd never live it down. I laughed softly, leaning against him. And now, he squeezed my hand. Now I think losing you would have been the real punishment. I didn't say anything because my throat was too tight, my heart too full. I just kissed him, slow and unhurried, under the glow of the city. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. Looking back now, it feels strange to think that everything started with a stupid game. With cards on a floor, with laughter echoing off walls, with a dare meant to tease. It feels strange to think that a punishment was what cracked open something bigger than either of us could have expected. But maybe that's how love works. Maybe it doesn't begin with grand gestures or carefully laid plans. Maybe it begins with something small, something silly, something that shouldn't mean anything at all, until it suddenly means everything. Because when I think about him now, I don't think about the fear or the mistakes or the silence. I think about his hand in mine under the blossoms. I think about the way he looks at me when he thinks I'm not watching. I think about how, in a world full of dares and punishments, he's the one choice I'll never regret making. If you had told me back then that I'd forgive him, that I'd learn to trust him again, that I'd even learn to trust myself again, I would have laughed. I would have told you I wasn't that strong. But love has a way of surprising us. It shows up where we least expect it, takes risks we're too scared to take on our own. It pushes us into the unknown and asks, "Are you brave enough?" And maybe that's the real dare. Not the ones we play in games, not the ones we laugh off in front of friends, but the dare to love, to risk heartbreak, to risk disappointment, to risk everything, for the chance at something real. And when he asked me if I was scared all those months ago, maybe I should have said yes. Because I was. But I'm glad I didn't. Because the truth is, I'd rather be scared with him than safe without him. So this is our story. Not perfect. Not easy. Not the kind of love that arrives without scars. But it's ours. And if you take anything from it, let it be this. Sometimes the loser doesn't get punished. Sometimes the loser wins everything.